There is an undeniable allure in the mysteries that weave their ways through lore and legend, casting shadows of wonder across the landscapes of human imagination. These stories, be they whispered in the dark or passed down through generations, find their power in what they leave unsaid, the unanswered question and unresolved threads, and the tantalizing hints at the truth that may never be fully grasped. To unravel such mysteries or to solve these timeless enigmas often feels like plucking the wings from a butterfly, leaving something vibrant and alive suddenly still. It's the very act of wondering, of pondering the impossible, that breathes magic into the legends we cherish. Perhaps it is not answers we seek, but the thrill of the journey, the spark of the unknown, and the enduring belief that some stories are meant to remain unsolved. Welcome back to Tragedy with a View. I am your host, Kayla, and Amanda is back with me
Hello.
for another not so
It's going to be a riveting episode.
it is going to be a riveting episode. I'd say it's not so morbid episode, but also it kind of is. So,
Okay.
well, did I tell you what this is
I
about?
actually don't. I don't know if you did, but I don't remember if you did.
Okay. So, actually before we jump into that, I want to mention two things. One, because the first time that I did merch last, I think it was October, I did a terrible time, or I did a terrible job of saying it on the podcast that I'm doing a merch release. I was really good on social media, not so much on this talking platform. So I'm going to say now, in June, we're doing a merch release.
Nice.
I'm going to have some new art. And one of the pieces is specifically, I'm already donating like all of my profits to a charity of listeners' choices, which, if that's something that you want to be a part of, subscribing on Patreon, Spotify, or Apple is the best way to do that. Merch options are also another great way to help support that. Just a little bit of a way that we can give back together. That being said, one of the designs for the shirts is going to be specifically for helping to protect our lands and our parks in the current political state we are in, because I think the latest that I've heard is that like people are getting their jobs back, and I have a feeling there's going to be a whole lot of back and forth over the next 4 years. But unfortunately, the Trump administration was very forward the last time they held office that they were going after public lands because that's where a lot of resources are that could make them a lot of money. And getting those resources would destroy the land that we have fought so hard to protect over centuries. And so one of the shirt's designs is 100% going to protect the parks and protect the public lands. So that's going to be like a little bit of a separate thing, but that will be coming in June. But today's episode, we are not talking about anything in the United States of America. So nestled high in the mountains of India is the mountain Trishul, which is one of India's tallest mountains at 23,360 feet or 7,120 meters in height. There is a glacial lake by the name of Rupkund, which sits near the bottom of a slope on Trishul. This lake is at 16,470 feet in elevation or 5,020 meters. And it holds a very curious sight. The lake itself is surrounded by like snow peaks and just pristine landscape that you look at and you're just kind of in awe. And it's partially because there's like this beautiful blue from the water that's surrounded by like the grays from the rocks and the whites from the snow and the blue from the sky. And it is not a completely impossible trek to get to, but it is a 4 to 5 day hike away from the nearest town. So this is a little bit of a tourist destination. The lake translates, or it doesn't translate, but it is also known as Skeleton Lake. The satellite view, when you look at it, does this kind of look like a skull?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. Which I thought was just like very interesting that it's so easily got the Skeleton Lake, and it looks like a skull, and it is called Skeleton Lake because of the mass amount of skeletons that are in and around this lake.
Yeah, I just Google imaged that, and it was just bones.
Yes.
Skeleton bones in almost every picture.
Bones and bones and bones.
This is actually really small.
It is. It is a very small lake because it is in the mountains and at a high elevation. The lake is actually, I guess, produced by melting snow and ice from the mountains. And so it just drains into this little bowl that's in this high altitude valley. And that's what created the lake. And because it doesn't ever fully evaporate, it lasts all year long. So
it never dries out.
It never dries out.
Water. Okay.
Yes. Current day, there are people that come to the area because it is a popular hiking destination. Again, it does take 4 to 5 days to hike to, but there's also a large celebration in the nearby Nanda Devi National Park, which is the celebration is called the Nanda Devi Rajat, which worships the goddess Nanda, and this celebration is held every 12 years. So there are people who go past this area to get to this celebration, and of course they stop along this curious site to see it. Rupkund Lake changes sizes throughout the year, but it's not by so much that it's like, oh, sometimes this lake is really big and sometimes it's really small. It's always kind of on the small end. It's actually only 40 meters or 130 feet in diameter, and it is only about 3 meters or 9 feet in depth. And the lake is actually decreasing in size a little bit, but steadily over the last few years due to climate change and just there being less snow deposited on the mountains that are then melting and draining into the lake, quote unquote. And so while it's decreasing in size, it's also exposing more and more bones that are in the water. So there are roughly 600 to 800 skeletons in this area.
600 to 800 in the lake?
600 to 800 in the lake and in the surrounding land. So like within this valley and around the water.
Okay, I've got questions.
I bet you do.
That's a lot.
So also for context warning, I am going to refer to these remains as skeletons, but because of the elevation and because some of these skeletons have been submerged in water for a long period of time, some still have flesh attached to them, which...
Imagining the smell. But if they're submerged, then maybe it wouldn't smell. Rotting flesh is a special kind of disgusting.
That I hope to never experience.
Yeah.
Never mind. I live on a farm for a while. I've experienced it. The skeletons were discovered by a park ranger by the name of Hari Kishan Madwal, who worked for the Nanda Devi National Park for the first time in 1942. Another disclaimer, was not the first person to actually find these bones, but he was the first person to actually document them and like take them to the outside world. And so while the bones have been known about for a very long time, this was like the first step to like being like you, I have questions and I want to know the answer to these questions. And how do we figure out the answer to these questions? We research. So
he removed them?
No, he left them. But he did take this information that eventually would get to the outside world and be like, oh, now we know where all of these skeletons are. We can find them again. We can go to them. And instead of it just kind of being like, ooh, there's this skeleton lake where there's all these dead bodies, it was more confirmed that
So it was more of a rumor initially, and then he confirmed it, or did people
legend.
not know?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
legend. And so it was like an unconfirmed legend, but
There's 800. How is it unconfirmed? Like, right? I mean, it's only 9 feet.
yeah, we'll get to.
I mean, you couldn't go there without tripping on a skeleton bone.
We will get to some explanations, and some non-explanations. So this occurred.
Sorry, I threw you off with my questions.
No, okay. I am nearly 100% positive that he discovered these bones in 1942 because it was during World War II. And so, of course, we probably get to that later, but I'm pretty sure it was 1942. It was during World War II, which at that time, because there was all this tension going on between the countries within Europe and Asia, and like everybody was attacking everybody and nobody really knew who was really on each other's sides, and all this stuff was going on. When this information was released, Britain seemed to believe that these people were Japanese forces that had perished, and they had perished in an attempt to invade British colonies. And so,
and they ended up in a glacial lake on the top of a mountain.
yes,
in India.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were absolutely Japanese forces that had perished. It was a sign that an invasion was coming, and that this was just a failed attempt. And then they learned that the bones were actually too old to be of
Shocker.
recent.
Yeah.
Being deposited in this lake. So that like settled that down, but also because there was a war going on, nobody was focusing on how did these bones get here and why did these bones get here. So with these bodies or skeletons, there was also a bunch of items such as spearheads, wooden artifacts, leather slippers, and rings. And I also found a resource that said that there were no trade goods, which is telling that these people were probably not traveling to trade items. But they also said that there were no weapons with the group, which is interesting because then there's another source that says that there were spearheads, which is a weapon. And so it's just one of those things where it's like there might have been spearheads, there might have not been. Both of these sources are like reputable sources. And so it's like, I don't know which one's correct, so I'm just going to tell you both. That one source said that there were spearheads. The other one says there's no weapons. Whether you decide that a spearhead is a weapon or not is up to you, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and it could be if there's 800, these bodies could have been deposited over 100 years. So the purpose for the people in the first section might have been different than why the back half ended up in that lake.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. So again, because there was a war going on, nobody actually thought to get around to these bodies and answering any questions that anybody had until the 50s. And that was when some samples of the bones were taken and put on display at the Anthropological Survey of India Museum. Studies were done on these bones, which resulted in determining that these people died. Most of these people died from a round object that fell on them from above. So
I knew it. I knew it was ritualistic and sacrificing. Dude, I'm telling you, it is. The minute you said 800 in one spot, I was like, oh yeah, this was for a purpose.
There's a purpose.
They hiked themselves up there
and bludgeoned themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but also the potential for a hailstorm is a potential theory. So they found that these people had damage to their skulls and their shoulders in round. You know what? I'm going to back up. We're going to come to that in a minute. I want to get through the rest of this information first because it plays into what you just said. They studied the bodies in 1956, or they collected the bones in 1956, did a study on those bones. They collected the bones of 38 individuals, and at the time, they did radiocarbon dating at Oxford, which found that these people died in 850 CE, plus or minus 30 years.
Okay, that's a long time
That's
ago.
a long time ago. They also were able to confirm that of the 38 individuals, or they had belonged to 3 distinct groups of people, 23 of which came from South Asia, 14 came from the Eastern Mediterranean area, and 1 came from Southeast Asia, which implies that these people did not die in one singular event. So the National Geographic then collected the 38 bones in 2003 and did a secondary study on them. And they used researchers from India, the United States, and Germany. And these people were like experts in their fields. And the study lasted 5 years and found that there were 3 large groups of different people who died here in 2 separate events, roughly 1,000 years apart.
Okay.
So they also found that everyone was taller than average. Most of them were men between the ages of 35 and 40 years old, and that 15 of the 38 were women. So that gives you like roughly half were women, half were men. In 2019, another analysis was done, but this didn't really confirm anything more than the 2003 study. But it did note that they really only had like a 5% gathering of the bones from what was at this lake. And so they acknowledged that there was quite a bit of room for error with, okay, maybe half were men and maybe half were women, or maybe they collected the 15 women's bodies and the rest were men. So it was basically just like confirming what they already knew, or what we've already gathered, which is that about half of the bones came from Southern Asia. The majority of the other half came from what is currently known as Greece. But again, things shifted around so much in the very long period of time between 850 CE and 2025. So who knows what exactly was there at that point in time. And then a very small percentage of that second half came from Southeastern Asia. The 2 groups died roughly 1,000 years apart, and that they were potentially evenly split between men and women, and that they were taller than average humans for that time. Some sources reference that there were no children or babies, but this doesn't really fit with the theory, or at least the first theory that we are going to touch on next. Of course, there are plenty of theories about what happened, and as more information gets revealed, more theories pop up. So initially, when these bones were discovered, there was a legend that said the king of Kannauj, which is an ancient city of India, who went by the name of Raja Jadsaval, were on a pilgrimage to the Nanda Devi shrine. I couldn't find a definitive distance between these 2 locations, but the shrine is known as a sacred site that gets rid of evil, so there is motivation for him to go to this shrine. And along with him, he brings his wife, Randi Balampa, who was pregnant, along with their servants and some others, including a group of dancers for entertainment. And
oops.
Yeah, this made the goddess really super mad, and she released a hailstorm that killed all of them.
Oh,
So
how did it kill? It killed all of them?
all of them.
How do we know that's what happened then? Who reported no survivors? Or like, this is exactly what happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very good critical thinking question there. So my question, at least, so when it comes to hail, it's not uncommon that we get really big chunks of hail. I don't think it would take something obnoxiously large to do enough damage to a person's head to kill them. The damage done to the skulls implied that the hail was the size of about a softball.
That'll do it.
That'll do it. So the damage was done mostly to the head and shoulders, but I didn't see anything saying any damage anywhere else, which doesn't necessarily make sense to me that hail would have actually done that, because if I'm in a hailstorm, the first thing I'm doing is putting my arms up over my head, which means my arms are going to take some damage. My back is probably going to take some damage. People who have already fallen, the hail is going to continue to fall on their bodies. Why is the damage only the head and the shoulders? Unless the more likely event was that another group of people used weapons and bludgeoned these people. And once they were on the ground, okay, move on.
Yeah.
And
well, yeah.
the taller than average also makes me think that they might have been like some sort of
Soldier.
soldier, warrior type person. And so it would make sense that they would get into a battle.
Now, were the women's bones dated between both time periods, or?
It did not specify.
Okay.
So that's a good question, but it didn't specify. Although I did find that India had a hailstorm in 1888 that killed 246 people. So I guess it's not completely unreasonable to believe that hail would kill 300 people in the middle of nowhere where there's no shelter. But again, it doesn't answer all of the questions.
Yeah. I mean, it's plausible. It's just, it's a little surprising if that were true.
I would be surprised if any of these theories were true, quite honestly.
Okay.
There is this idea that some of the people might have been from an attempted invasion on Tibet in 1841, and they were the remains of the soldiers of General Zawar Singh's army who fled during the attempt, who were going to invade, ran into some bad weather, decided to bail on their invasion, and in the process of bailing on the invasion were attacked. And so there was roughly 70 people who got away and escaped. But again, that's not 300. So
Right.
could these people be part of that? Maybe. But 70 is not 300. You don't get 300 bodies out of 70 men that fled.
Didn't you say the elevation was what, 7,000 feet and change?
16,000.
Oh, I was way off. Okay.
7,000 meters, yeah.
7,000 meters. Is this, I think I need to know the location. Is this in the middle of a trade route? Because
No.
who's choosing to travel up 16,000 feet, like, to get somewhere else unless they absolutely have to, right? You don't just happen upon the top of a 16,000 foot mountain.
Right.
Right.
So I actually have something about the trade route in like 2 paragraphs. So we'll just say it now.
Okay.
It is not near any known trade routes. And the idea that a pilgrimage of some sort, such as like what the king was doing to try to make amends to the goddess that he upset, it could make sense. Any information that these experts could find about trade routes or pilgrimages or any known routes that would take you anywhere close to here wasn't discovered until after all of these people died in the 19th century. And so it just seems very unlikely that this would have been like something related to trade or some sort of pilgrimage or some sort of like intentional travel. It also doesn't answer why people from the Mediterranean area were traveling through the Himalayas to participate in what we only know to be Hindu traditions.
Right. I mean, I don't know the demographic of people and religion in 800 CE. So perhaps it was more, it was less stratified than it is today. Yeah, I'm just when you first started describing this, it sounded to me like that is a destination.
Yeah.
Rather than I'm happening upon Skeleton Lake.
Yes.
It doesn't sound like that is what would, maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps it is like just a high traffic area if you're passing through that mountain range, but in my head it sounds more like a destination, and if it's a destination then my mind goes to rituals and for a specific purpose.
Yeah. I agree. I don't think people, in my mind, and of course I am not always in the like most popular vote category of things, but in my mind, if I'm like, okay, I need to go that direction, and in my way is a whole bunch of mountains, I am not going to pick the biggest mountain to try to get over. I'm going to go for like the smoothest, flattest, easiest route. And because this lake is on the tallest mountain in India, it just doesn't make sense that people would be like, yeah, let's go climb a mountain while we're doing whatever it is we're doing. It almost seems more like there is like a ritualistic aspect where it's like, we do need to climb the tallest mountain because it's associated. I know there's a lot of mountains in India that are associated with gods and goddesses and honoring them and all of these things that I'm not even going to pretend to understand because I'm not a super religious person, and so I've just never engaged in it a lot, but I know that those exist. And it makes way more sense to me that people would be like, yeah, we're going there for a religious reason because that is the tallest mountain and it's associated with this god or goddess that we know as blank.
Right.
Speaking of that, this also could have potentially been a mass grave location where people who were ill and completely unable to be cured were separated from the healthy population and essentially sent away to die.
4 to 5 day travel is tough.
I agree.
It could, I mean, a burial site could be, it's kind of in line with ritualistic behavior. 5 day travel sucks.
I agree. But
especially when you're like, you're the one like, okay, well, I'm going to walk 5 days to die. So I have 5 days to think about.
Bye.
Ugh.
I mean,
find somewhere closer.
Yeah, even if it's like, oh, this is honoring my people because like this is how we do things when we know we're dying, like that still sucks. There is also the potential that these people were in the process of finding a new trade route or finding a new pilgrimage route, and they got to this area, which there's a route today that takes you through the area. It takes you to see the lake. It takes you along this knife edge ridge, which is roughly 16,400 feet tall or 5,000 meters. And the lake lies 650 feet or 200 meters below this ridge. So I don't think it's impossible to believe that an avalanche or a rock slide or some sort of natural disaster occurred while people were like, yeah, we're going to make it across this mountain. We're establishing a new route.
They'd be crushed though, right?
And it took out all these people. Unless they were just buried.
I mean, their bones would be pulverized
Unless they were just buried.
by an avalanche.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no.
Listen,
We've talked about avalanches.
Yes, we have.
I don't know that you. I don't know that you just get nicely buried. I mean, you don't get nicely buried. Maybe
But
you're not pulverized, but
we also don't have a complete sample of the bones.
That's true.
Because
I'd like to know how they sampled those. Did they have 38 bones or 38 rough skeletons?
They collected, okay, 0 of the skeletons were intact.
Sure, right.
So they did the best that they could to collect from same skeletons, but because the bones were just scattered through the area, it was extremely hard for them to differentiate between, like, okay, this person is laying here, this is this person, and this person's laying
Sure,
here, this is
yeah.
this person. There was a lot of overlap there, which I think gives more plausibility to the potential for an avalanche, because you're just getting tossed around. You're not gonna, like, if you're going there to purposely die, whether it's because you're ill or it's some sort of ritual, the chances of you lying down crisscrossed on top of each other is slim to none. You're probably going to lay down next to each other, but you're not going to necessarily be like scattering yourselves around the area, which is essentially what has happened. Of course, this has also been centuries ago, so there's a lot that can happen between then and now. But yeah, they tried to collect from the same people, and I think they got the samples that they intended to get, and probably samples that they didn't intend to get. And I don't believe that they had a single full skeleton. To kind of more clarify the answer to your question.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a biased sampling. If there's 800, or if they're extrapolating that there's 600 to 800, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And there's also the potential that some of these bodies that are in there are not related to any of the 3 categories that were already determined, or maybe there was actually only two categories, and that one person who was from Southeast Asia went there and either died because it was an accident, or maybe he was ill, or maybe he committed suicide, or there's a lot of unknowns, purely because they didn't collect everything and just take it all, which why would they? At the same time,
it's too much work.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. And also, if this is a ritualistic site, it's extremely disrespectful to go taking everything.
Yeah, I'm also like, did they LiDAR this lake? Like, how do they know? How are they getting 600 to 800? Like, how do they know it's essentially full of bones?
I think it's based on an estimate of, like, they counted skulls in a certain area and then just estimated from there.
Right, but they'd have to know, like, I can see how they'd extrapolate, like, okay, we're going to sample from 20 square feet. The lake is this many square feet, so we're going to estimate. But they'd have to know that it's like a universal distribution, right? They'd have to know that the lake is full of bones, hence the extrapolation of numbers.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do they know that? Well, I know it's only 9 feet deep.
Yeah.
But did they LiDAR this? Did someone scuba? And you know what I mean?
In 9 feet?
Snorkel? I don't know.
Okay. The number of bodies in Rupkund Lake, also known as Skeleton Lake, was estimated through a combination of archaeological surveys, radiocarbon dating, and genetic analysis. According to Live Science, the studies were done as as the lake's ice melts and reveals that the lake contains the remains of between 300 and 800 individuals, which is a little bit different of a number than 600 to 800. But it doesn't say like specifically what they did to calculate that number, other than archaeological surveys, which could be any number of things. Do you have any theories? Or which one do you lean towards the most?
As far as how they got there?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it lends itself more to a destination than a happenstance location. And given the timeline, I'd lean towards some kind of ritual being performed. I mean, I don't know. The hailstorm could still align, like especially if there is a group migration to Skeleton Lake for a purpose, and then oops, we got caught in a storm. Maybe. Yeah, it just I'd have to know more about the topography and the history of that location to determine if travel makes sense. Again, it just doesn't feel, but I don't know. I don't know the topography. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I know travel in 800 CE was clearly very different, and sometimes the higher route was the safest. I don't know. I don't know what's surrounding it. I don't know what's on the other side of the other mountain. So perhaps, but my gut instinct is be like, they went there on purpose.
For a reason.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think what stood out the most to me is that at least of the bones that they collected, they almost went out of their way to comment that these were midlife adults who were taller than the average person, which it makes me think like some sort of warrior or someone who was doing something either to defend the area or to bring honor to the area and their family and their people. And so like it could have been like some sort of act of war, and that's how everyone ended up having damage to their head and their skulls and their shoulders, was because there were people using weapons of the time, and because the flesh of those particular bodies is gone because they've been exposed to air, we don't have the flesh wound to note if there were spears or arrows or something used. Also, if you've ever tried looking for arrowheads, you know how difficult they can be to find, and it's like you almost have to not be looking for them to find them. And if you're in the mountains where there's just rocks upon rocks upon rocks upon rocks, it's just going to make those types of things harder to find. So it wouldn't be surprising to me if there were like arrowheads and spears out there that just haven't been located yet. But I do think the initial deposit of bodies was due to some sort of violent act. Maybe even like, we captured these intruders and now they need to die, so we're going to bring them to this place and we're going to kill them. I think then the second was almost more ritualistic, where it was like, we are honoring these people and returning to this location for a ritualistic reason or a spiritual reason, and whether it was on purpose or accident, they died there too. And that just makes the most sense to me, is that there's two completely different but somewhat combined circumstances that resulted in the death of the death of the large amount of people in one kind of small area.
Yeah, it's very small. I guess another question I have is, what do they mean by middle-aged? Middle-aged for 2025 or for 800 CE? Because those are going to be drastically different numbers.
I completely agree. The source said middle age, and they gave the ages 35 to 40.
Okay. So not middle-aged for 800 CE.
I don't think that's middle age.
Old
That's
age.
elderly.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the source was, but I remember looking at that and being like, this is usually like a pretty good, a pretty on point source. It wasn't National Geographic, but it was like one of their like offshoots of it. And I was like, man.
I mean, they're not wrong. I mean, it's middle-aged, but for our timeline.
Oh, yeah.
So
oh, yeah.
Ideally they would have specified that, but
they didn't.
Yeah. But if we're talking thousands of years ago, then that's an old person.
Yeah. And
so then that's a different context.
4 to 5 days into the mountains for it. There had to have been a reason for them to go there. It almost is like, I mean, people in India and like around Everest specifically for a long time were like, no, we don't climb the mountains. That will anger the mountain.
Mountains were off limits?
For a period of time.
What's that? What's that period of time? Not specifically, but is it like...
It was prior to them realizing the commercialization could bring in money to their communities. So
like pre-1800, maybe pre-1600?
Maybe.
Okay.
I would say pre-1800 because I believe it was in the 1800s that people started being like, yeah, I'm going to climb Everest, and started attempting.
People finally had time to like do things hard for entertainment rather than survival.
But yeah, for a long time, they were like, we do not climb mountains because that angers the gods. That's disrespectful to them, and we don't do it. And so it's so weird for me to believe that somebody would look at the tallest mountain in India and look at it and be like, yeah, we're going to go anywhere near that thing, knowing that they have this relationship with the mountains that is to be respectful and is to be mindful of how powerful and deadly that they can be. And so the purpose of going there would have had, in my mind, had to have been spiritual in some capacity, and respecting whatever god or goddess that they felt like they needed to for it.
And then there's a possibility that kind of both are true, in that, 800 CE, you have perhaps a immigration of people from Greece, Macedonia-ish area. Perhaps they're traveling, and then you have a mass casualty event for whatever reason, hailstorm or otherwise. And then the lore begins, and then the legend begins.
Yeah.
And then the reasoning shifts.
Yeah.
After that, it's like, okay, now that's a place of death and respect, etc.
Yeah.
And it becomes used in a different way.
Well, yeah, most legends are maybe not most legends.
I immediately went to Bigfoot, and I was like, well, I'm going to challenge you on that.
not all legends. There are legends out there, though. There are stories out there that are like, oh, we are going to tell our children these terrible stories so that way they will behave.
Sure. Yeah.
And so like there's almost like that vibe to it with the king who angered the goddess, and it was like, you don't do these things because you'll anger the goddess, and then when you try to make amends to her, she's going to be pissed off still, and she's going to kill you and your whole family.
Yeah.
Do you want to bring shame upon your whole family?
Yeah.
Then you don't do this. I can see that being like
sure.
the like, oh, there's this event. We know about these things. How do we use it to get our children to listen?
Yeah, it can be weaponized for control. And it can also just be an explanation to rationalize what happened, because, which you see in a lot of different things, religion, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the the method of coping with bad outcomes is, well, the reason is because of this, when potentially there is no reason. It just happened.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think people like to have
Yes.
answers to
Yeah.
why something happened, and sometimes the answer is that there was no reason. And
Yeah, and
it
that
just
doesn't sit well
it just happened.
with humans.
Yes, I agree. So kind of moving on from the theories, there is, of course, with the lovely advances in technology and social media, which have a lot of benefits and have brought a lot of good, they also have brought some bad, such as
Really? You don't say.
people now, they know about this location and they go to this location and they've collected and moved and kept these bones. And you know, a lot of the people who go out into the wilderness regularly live, I don't want to say live, but try to keep pace with the leave no trace principles, which I've tried to explain to Logan a couple of times. Like, you know, we go out into the wilderness. The saying goes that you leave nothing but footprints and take nothing but memories or pictures. And, you know, him being 6, that's a hard thing for him to grasp because he's like, ooh, rock, ooh, stick, ooh, lizard. And so it's like, I get the desire to collect cool things, right? But also, why are we collecting bones?
Yeah. I think that's not uncommon. It's not a particular urge that I have, but I think that's weirdly common among humans. I don't get it.
Oh, there's cow. I was gonna say cow skulls, but is it cow skulls or is it like the Western decor that has like the long horned cow design, but it's actually like an actual skull and actual horns, is like, or keeping your deer antlers also.
Speaking of which, I just said I don't have that urge, and I have one of my 230 Safari tabs open is a company that like has like artistic skull, like cow skulls.
Okay.
Honestly, they're so dope, but they're very expensive. So, technically I lied, but generally speaking, I forgot I have that Safari tab open. Generally speaking, I'm not so much attracted to skulls and bones, but there are a lot of people that are. I think there's probably differing reasons for that, but yeah, it's not good form to collect human bones, human remains.
Yeah. So basically what I'm saying is that if you ever go to this location, anybody at any point in time that you're listening, please just leave the bones alone.
Yeah.
I think we can all probably agree that this was probably in some aspect was a ritualistic or a spiritual purpose to these people going here and dying here. And it just feels so wrong to me to be messing with things that are like, the bones are not actually important to you, which is why you're picking it up and collecting it and moving it or making shapes with the bones or potentially even taking them home. Like,
no, I don't think in the same way. I think we do have an inkling to, I think, stay close to death for some reason. Humans specifically.
I mean,
there's i.e. a graveyard, you know, like and over, I think, all of humankind, there's a very large emphasis on recognizing and acknowledging death. And I think perhaps that is part of it. I mean, I think there's like a souvenir kind of vibe to it as well, which is weird, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's like an urge to connect to humanity, and part of humanity is death, and either way it's poor form. Don't do it, but
unless you're
I think it's complicated,
and the
maybe
bones are talking to you.
Oh, yeah.
Then be my guest because I don't want you to curse me. So
also, you're making it very confusing for future aliens who have to come down and kind of piece together our situation, our experience now.
Guys, these people like to collect dead bodies. I don't think they're ready for us yet because they're going to start collecting us soon. Let's get out of here.
Oh boy.
Disable the ship.
So do they have any regulations on going to Skeleton Lake? Like, can anyone just go?
Last I heard, there are attempts to protect the area.
Okay.
What that specifically looks like is not confirmed. I think there's effort there to try to preserve the area. They just haven't figured out a way to actually do it because the location is hard to access.
Mm-hmm.
What are you supposed to do? Have a man there 24/7 in literally no shelter at high elevations? And yeah, I mean, it's a difficult area to actually like enforce the protection of.
Yeah.
Because it's just so remote.
You're kind of relegated to like regulatory means, rules. Hey, don't go there. And if you do, this is the consequence. But we're kind of relying on, finding out about it because there's no way to police that.
Yeah. It's almost like when Sam and I climbed Angel's Landing a couple of years ago, or like almost 3 years ago now. It was almost 3 years ago now. They had like at the bottom of the trail, they had someone who was like, okay, do you have a permit for Angel's Landing? Which we did not, because we were not going to climb Angel's Landing because Sam is admittedly very scared of heights. And I have learned that my fear of heights has resurfaced over the years. I for sure would have been like, yeah, let's go. And then I probably would have gotten into the middle of it and been like, oh, this is actually kind of scary.
Yeah.
But I'm a little bit better about recognizing that now. Anyways, they didn't have a ranger at the bottom of the chain section, which is where you need the permit to go. And so it was almost like the honor system, like, okay, you have a permit, you can go onto the chains, but there's no one up there to actually enforce it. I don't know if they normally have someone there or if like we just caught it at a weird time.
Bob called in sick that day.
But yeah. Yeah, it could have very easily just been like, oh, okay, yeah, we're not going to go there. And then we very easily could have.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those situations where it's like, sure, okay. Some people are going to take advantage of that though.
Yes.
So kind of circling back to, people are always wanting answers and, to kind of shine the light on what mystery is lurking in the dark corner. The mystery is almost more alluring than the answers, and still, in this case, the lack of answers. While oral history can shine a light on what might have happened, the human drive for answers illustrates what lengths we will go to answer long, unanswered questions. And maybe, just maybe, the legend lives on for a reason. Even though like we maybe have like the answers and we're convinced like, yeah, this was probably like a spiritual thing or like just a natural disaster happened, like something very straightforward, the legend lives on and it's going to continue to live on, even if answers show up and people are like, yeah, actually, this is what happened. It didn't have anything to do with a hailstorm. That legend is going to live on and it's going to continue. And I think that is probably the cooler aspect of this particular story, is that it's just survived for so long that the truth isn't gonna set that legend free.
Which brings us to the JFK files. And if they get released.
Hey, we're getting off topic now, so if you want to stick around, stick around. If not,
see you next week. 41-minute mark, we deter.
Yeah, probably about that point.
Isn't it curious though? Like, what's it going to feel like to potentially have all the answers?
Have you seen the video? I think it's like a TikTok video where it's like what we thought the JFK file, or what we wanted the JFK files release to look like, and it was the Mean Girls scene where Regina George is just throwing papers down the school hallways and taping them up and slamming them on lockers and like just throwing piles of papers. And it's like, that's everything that we wanted and nothing that we got.
Oh no. Listen, I'm still holding out hope, but it does genuinely make me think of that, because there's so much speculation regarding the assassination of JFK, and I am curious to know, like, I would like it to be, here are the answers and then we can like move on, right? That's the argument for releasing them regardless of what it says. Perhaps it's implicating the FBI, probably, but at least we can like know, and then there's a path forward.
Yeah.
But now I'm curious if like perhaps that we get answers, and then like what does that do? People leave it alone, or does it then instigate new theories? I mean, I don't know what's in there. It is a curious idea, though.
I think at least for America, I think that everyone is in a place where they just kind of want to fight with each other, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even me today, there were a couple of things, like super innocent things, like nothing to do with politics or the government or anything. It was like somebody was like, oh, I've got this puppy and she was spayed a few days ago. She's got this lump here. What do I do? And someone commented on it saying, please crate your fucking dogs. It's better for them. It's healthier for them. And I was like,
what does that have to do with?
That's only because, so I guess one thing that they were saying was that their puppy she was just super energetic and she wasn't holding still, and they were worried that something might have torn open inside, and that's why there was a lump there, and that like it caused a hernia or something.
Okay.
And somebody was like, please crate your fucking dogs. And I was like, and she's like, it's better for them. And I'm like, that's only if the puppy has been properly crate trained prior to now. And that the crate is a safe place, and the crate is a good space for them, and it's a calm place for them. And I'm like typing this all out, and then I was like, Kayla, we don't fight with strangers on the internet. Delete, move on. I had to do that a few times today where I was like, it was just super innocent things, and I was like, I just clearly want to fight today.
Yeah.
Which I think is the overall sense that I'm seeing from, I think it's just the space that we're in right now is I
mean, I do think we're living in a soup of consternation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also, that could just be amplified online. Like in real life, how many encounters do we have where it's like, this person's an asshole, and like you want to argue and fight?
Yeah.
That almost never happens.
No.
In my car all the time, right? But
in the shower, I just had a fight with you and I won.
Every time I drive. No, but like genuinely, like you're not, it's very much like centered online. And I think it's a bit of an illusion.
Yes.
Which is a whole other podcast.
Amanda, would you like to start a podcast?
Online, put it online, talking about how the internet is a no, but yeah. I mean, I do get what you're saying. I think we gotta like check out of the online space, though.
Touch some grass.
Yeah.
Take your shoes off.
And it's nice. It's like, oh yeah. I mean, people are generally reasonable, and humanity exists in a different way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. And who knows, maybe Sally online making a comment about crating the dog, it comes off very aggressive and critical, but perhaps she had a very bad incident with a dog in a crate
Yeah.
in a spay, and she's feeling like desperate to help this little dog.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So now it wasn't delivered well, right? She could have communicated that much better,
Oh, yeah.
of course.
Or
But
maybe I just wanted to fight, and so I read it super
Sure.
aggressively. More
Yeah.
aggressively than she intended it to be.
maybe a little heightened with Axel
Yeah.
and things going on. So it's
Oh,
like,
yes.
okay,
Yeah.
this is the hill I'm going to die on on Monday.
but also, don't crate your dogs unless they've been properly crate trained, and there's a way to do so in a calm and positive manner. And I've been training a dog for the last 3 weeks, so that's where I've been at. Yeah, so we went off of bones and to social media and files. And
Sorry, I got distracted with JFK files. I
That's
saw a
okay.
headline today and I was like, okay, it seems like we're going to get something. We'll see. I mean, I'm very hopeful, but we've been disappointed so far. So
I just would like to remind everyone who is also waiting for the files to be released that the government is stupidly slow with doing anything.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, the government is stupidly slow at accomplishing anything. So even though the timeline fits for you and it makes sense for you that the files should be released in a reasonable amount of time, probably not.
Yeah. And maybe there's something we don't know. Like someone made the comment about Epstein files.
Which is a whole nother set
That's
of
a whole
files.
other podcast as well. But they had mentioned like perhaps it's not just a matter of flatly releasing them. There could be minors implicated and obtaining certain consents for information being released. And like there's a whole, I was like, okay, yeah, that's fair. I've never thought about that.
Yeah. Protection orders.
Sure.
People potentially need names changed,
Yes.
locations changed.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a very, very brief look at that actually today at work. There's an employment thing. People are arguing. They could have settled this case a long time ago and they didn't. And they're basically just suing each other out of spite is what it is.
Oh, nice.
But there's a minor involved. And the information that one party is releasing to the other has sensitive information about the minor. And so now we are having to go through the whole process of getting a protection order for the minor because we're worried about the other party having access to that information.
Yes.
So yeah, it's probably more cumbersome than the general public knows.
Yeah.
And it takes more time than the general public knows. And if you're talking about more than, a handful of minors and having to sweep through all of the pages of paper to make sure that information is not inadvertently released is a time-consuming process.
Yeah.
So.
And also they're probably covering up for high-profile people as well.
Yeah.
Both are probably true.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. We need to have Sally 1, Sally 2, and Sally 3. We don't actually know their identities, but okay, cover them up now. Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this one up since we've clearly gone off the subject. And
sorry.
I might actually leave this stuff in there because it's entertaining. And who doesn't like to
they
talk
can
about
check
politics?
out. Hey, fast forward. That's fine.
All right, Amanda, thank you for doing this with me. And
thanks for having me on again, of course.
I enjoy the detours.
And don't forget about new merch coming out in June.
New merch coming in June. I know we're 3 months ahead of time, but
that's 3 months to get excited for
3 months to
new
get excited.
things.
I'm actually really excited. Okay. Everyone, thank you for listening. We're gonna go now. Bye. What is life without close calls with disaster? Thank you for listening. Don't forget to follow the podcast to be the first to hear the now weekly episodes. Join our subscription on Patreon, Apple, or Spotify today and immerse yourself in the haunting beauty of the great outdoors. For around $4 a month, you'll get exclusive access to the first episode of each month and early access to all other episodes, showcasing the morbid and mysterious side of nature. Please Please reach out with story requests, and if you have your own story, please email tragedywithaview@gmail.com for a chance to have your story featured on a later episode. Again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.